Well, Vice President Harris is expected to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while he's in Washington this week. Multiple protests are planned over his handling of the war in Gaza. The Israeli leader is due to address a joint session of Congress on Wednesday. His visit has been overshadowed by President Biden's decision to drop out of the presidential race. Well, President Biden's support for Israel during the Gaza war has provoked a backlash from some Democrat supporters, and this was reflected in the large numbers of Democrats who voted uncommitted in primaries early this year. Now, that includes 1 in 5 voters in Minnesota, more than 10% in Michigan and North Carolina. As Kamala Harris prepares to sit down with Benjamin Netanyahu this week, here's a look at Washington's shifting stance on the war in Gaza.
In the weeks following the October 7th terror attacks by Hamas, the message from Joe Biden's administration in Washington was clear. And his vice president was often tasked with conveying that stance.
We are going to continue to stand with Israel's right to defend itself. And let's be clear and never forget what happened on October 7th.
Kamala Harris repeated that message at home and during her multiple travels abroad. But as the war in Gaza dragged on, Washington's so-called ironclad commitment to Israel was slowly replaced by growing frustration, the rising death toll, the displacements, and the dwindling aid deliveries to the territory led to accusations Israel was deliberately targeting civilians and a shift in stance by the administration in Washington.
As Israel defends itself, it matters how. The United States is unequivocal. International humanitarian law must be respected. Too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Frankly, the scale of civilian suffering and the images and videos coming from Gaza are devastating.
Our resistance never stops. Protests against the war in Gaza and the Biden administration's continued political and military support of Israel have been taking place across the U.S., many on college campuses. In March, Harris became the first administration official to publicly call for an immediate temporary truce.
Given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire.
Harris is acutely aware of the potential voter backlash over the war in Gaza as she launches her bid to become the Democratic Party's nominee for president. She'll have a delicate balancing act maintaining the U.S.'s strong ties with Israel while seeking to retain or bring back voters discontented by the way the administration she's a part of has handled the war in Gaza.
Let's take a closer look at how attitudes to this war might sway votes in November. Reem Abou-Samra lectures in political science at the University of Michigan-Dearborn. She joins us from Detroit. Welcome to DW. Beyond campus protests...
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. Beyond campus protests, how big an issue is the Gaza war amongst voters?
I think it's one of the main primary issues that for Muslim American voters on their current agenda. But I will start by saying that the concept of the Muslim American vote is a bit reductive, considering that it's a very diverse community in the United States, both in terms of racially, economically, with regards to foreign policy and with regards to domestic policy. Just to give an example, to a study that was done in 2017, about a fourth of the Muslim American community identified as Black and African American, a fourth identified as white, where white has been conflated with many different groups like Arab, Persian, North African, and so on. About a fifth identified as Asian, a fifth identified as Arab, and the remaining were mixed across the board for Hispanic and Indigenous American, as well as other groups. So it's difficult to pinpoint a single Muslim voice on Harris as a presidential candidate, but also with the issue of Gaza, that is still one of the main concerns for the Muslim American community.
Okay, so yeah, I take your point about we're not dealing with a monolithic bloc here. Talk to us about how disaffection with the US position on this Gaza war has affected or has swayed Arab or Muslim voters, and how that might affect November's outcome?
Yeah. So based on what I'm hearing on the ground, there are four major perspectives with Harris as a candidate. This is only unfolding in the last couple of days. But the first perspective I've heard the most commonly is this sense of apathy because Harris is viewed as basically an extension of Biden. And this segment is mixed across the board, wanting to vote third party or independent. Some of them are hoping for another Democrat to run against her. And in some cases, some people are choosing to be rational non-voters. And, keeping in mind the abandoned Biden campaign that was taking place. So in order to win this group's vote, Harris really needs to showcase that her policies are her own and not Biden's, particularly with regards to Gaza. So back in March, that was quoted earlier, she had called for an immediate temporary ceasefire on the one hand, while at the same time declared that Israel had a right to defend itself. And for many Muslim Americans, this would be considering like batting for both sides of the team or for opposing sides of the team, in that it will be difficult for Harris to win this group over as someone who was in the room during the Biden administration. But in order to do so, she'd have to have a clearer policy agenda with advancements made immediately, moving towards peace with regards to Gaza.
Right. OK, I know you had a list of... forgive me, that's quite a long list. But let's stick with some of the points that you made there.
Sure.
If her problem, if Harris's problem is that she's effectively more of Biden, if when it comes to a choice of more of Biden or Trump, what are people telling you?
Yeah, so that was actually the second main group that I've been hearing on the ground. And this idea of, like, pardon the way I say this, but this lesser of two evils, or this rhetoric of that she's better than Trump. So some people, this is a smaller group, but some people see Harris as a solid replacement for Biden, given the abandoned Biden campaign, as a vote against Trump in the upcoming elections. It's a kind of cut your losses type of mentality, because people are seeing it, the presidential race, as exclusively two-party, rather than, viewing third parties or independents as having a potential to win. And so in this case, if the Democratic Party wants to win this group's vote, they'd have to be really strategic in selecting Harris's running mate and her policy platform. But again, like was noted, Harris is already on the campaign trail, and I listened to her virtually deliver her speech in Milwaukee, Wisconsin earlier today. And she's contrasting herself with Donald Trump, using her record as an attorney general, juxtaposed to Trump as a criminal or a felon. And this positioning may be effective for this second segment of the Muslim American population. But again, I think the first group still does not see her as a viable candidate until she can clearly state her policy platforms, particularly on the issue of Gaza, as well on mass incarceration within the prison system.
OK, they want to hear more definite policies from her. And given the US's long history of siding with Israel, when do you think that the Biden administration realised the potential for a backlash from Muslim and Arab voters over Gaza?
I would say that the Biden administration probably started to feel the backlash when mainstream media started to cover the abandoned Biden campaign. Michigan is a swing state, and really there was a poll that was done. I can't remember who conducted the poll, but there's a stronger leaning towards Trump in the Republican Party currently, and that was done at the end of June. So I'm not 100% sure, but what I'll say is that for Biden, and for many Muslim Americans, they see that Biden stepping down isn't only about what the media has talked about with regards to his age and his health, but also a response to the mounting pressure through the Abandon Biden campaign.
Right.
So I'm not sure if I answered that question.
Yes, I think you did.
You know.
And a fascinating analysis, and we thank you for it. Reem Abou-Samra from the University of Michigan-Dearborn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.